This apocalyptic survival story opens with a scene of bitter betrayal, a familiar yet harrowing start. The protagonist, Zhang Xiaoyang, finds himself suspended precariously above a pit teeming with ravenous zombies, while his ex-girlfriend, Quij Jing, jeers at his misfortune. She cruelly reminds him that all of his friends are dead, and soon his life will also come to an end, allowing him to join them in oblivion. As Zhang Xiaoyang reflects on the events that led him to this dire situation, he is consumed by guilt and self-loathing. He curses himself for having trusted this treacherous woman, who he now believes deserves nothing less than a miserable death. Yet, Quij Jing remains unfazed by his threats. She has moved on to a wealthier and more powerful man, known simply as the Fat Man, and has enlisted his help to dispose of Zhang Xiaoyang. The Fat Man, eager to oblige, suggests they prolong Xiaoyang's suffering for Quij Jing's amusement. Before triggering the mechanism that would send Xiaoyang plummeting into the zombie pit, the Fat Man mockingly thanks him for all the supplies he had so generously left behind, which would sustain them for months to come. With that, the floor beneath Zhang Xiaoyang gives way, and he falls into the cage. The frenzied zombies, driven by an insatiable hunger, descend upon him, tearing into his flesh as he screams in agony. In his final moments, Xiaoyang's only wishes for another chance at life, to make Quij Jing and her accomplice, Fat Man, pay for their betrayal. Then, suddenly, Zhang Xiaoyang awakens. He hears Quij Jing's grating voice once again, demanding to know why he hasn't transferred the house deed into her name. As he struggles to make sense of his surroundings, he realizes that he has somehow been transported back in time, to a point before the apocalypse began. In his previous life, Quij Jing had cunningly deceived him, swindling away the inheritance his parents had left him, leaving him destitute. When the apocalypse struck and society crumbled into chaos, he had managed to survive with the help of friends, eventually establishing a safe zone where they could live securely, away from the zombie hordes. But even then, Quij Jing reappeared, pretending to be a desperate survivor in need of shelter, only to betray him once more by opening the gates to their enemies. Now, in this second chance at life, Zhang Xiaoyang vows not to fall into the same trap. Quij Jing, unaware of his newfound resolve, continues to make her demands, including an exorbitant bride price of 400,000 yuan in addition to the house. She is convinced that her beauty still holds sway over him and that he remains blind to her true nature. But this time, Zhang Xiaoyang is determined to play it smart. He throws her out of his house, leaving Quij Jing bewildered by his sudden assertiveness. She cannot comprehend how her once pliant puppet has grown a spine. With Quij Jing out of his life, Zhang Xiaoyang turns his attention to the impending apocalypse. He has only a month to prepare, and this time, he is resolved to do things differently. Just then, he receives a notification, as if from some kind of game system. The Apocalypse system has been activated, and his first mission is titled Apocalypse Preparation. To complete it, he must acquire a piece of land and stockpile a year's worth of supplies, in return for which he will earn 10 points to spend in the system store. Zhang Xiaoyang is pleasantly surprised by this unexpected boon. The system store offers various items, including loot boxes and potions that can enhance physical strength. However, his thoughts are interrupted by the rumbling of his stomach. In his previous life, he had scrimped and saved every penny to meet Quij Jing's demands, leaving himself malnourished. Now, determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past, he orders a lavish meal, something he would never have allowed himself before. With the apocalypse looming, Zhang Xiaoyang decides to indulge in the pleasures of the present while he still can. A few hours later, his meal arrives, a legendary Michelin 3-star takeaway. As he savors the rich flavors of the braised pork, he reflects on the harsh contrast between this feast and the gruel he had been forced to endure during the apocalypse. The food is almost too good to be true, and he finds himself eating with abandon, devouring every last bite. Just as he finishes, his phone rings, pulling him back to reality and hinting at the challenges that lie ahead. As soon as Zhang Xiaoyang answered the phone, he instantly regretted it. The furious voice of Wei Shura, Quij Jing's friend, erupted from the speaker, demanding to know how he could dare treat Quij Jing so callously. According to Wei Shura, Quij Jing's demands were merely a test of his love, and his refusal to hand over his property showed that he had failed. However, if he were to bring the house deeds along with 1,000,000 yuan in cash as an apology, Wei Shura would graciously help him smooth things over with Quij Jing, insisting it was all just a misunderstanding. If he didn't comply, she warned, he could expect the relationship to end.
But Xiaoyang's patience had already worn thin. Who were these people to test him and demand so much? He had no intention of indulging their greed any longer. Before Wei Shura could continue her tirade, he bluntly told her to get lost, cutting the call short as she tried to object. Xiaoyang was done with these money-hungry women who had no genuine concern for him. Now, he had more important matters to attend to, like finding and purchasing a suitable piece of land where he could build a fortress, one that would be easy to defend and close to essential resources like water and forests. The following morning, Xiaoyang arrived at a real estate agency, where he was quickly approached by a consultant who inquired whether he was there to rent or buy a house. Xiaoyang assured her that his business was of far greater value. However, before the conversation could progress, a real estate sales manager, Zhu, appeared and rudely interrupted. He ordered the consultant, Xiaoning, to help with unloading a large shipment of toilet paper that had just arrived, dismissing her concerns that she was assisting a customer. Manager Zhu, taking one look at Xiaoyang's simple attire, assumed he was nothing more than a broke loser and certainly not a real customer. He scolded Xiaoning for forgetting what he had taught her and sent her to work in the backyard. This condescending attitude infuriated Xiaoyang, and he decided that the arrogant manager needed to be taught a lesson. He calmly asked Manager Zhu to repeat his insult and explain how he could dare look down on others so blatantly. Unfazed, Manager Zhu boasted of his status and smugly declared that he looked down on dogs like Xiaoyang. He even went as far as to say that if Xiaoyang could afford to buy even a toilet, he would eat shit on livestream. Xiaoyang's icy glare was enough to foreshadow that Manager Zhu would soon regret his words. Taking advantage of the manager's arrogance, Xiaoyang advised him to make sure to find some fresh, steaming shit later because he wasn't here to rent or sell a house, he was here to buy land. The other customers in the agency were shocked. It was rare to see someone with the means to buy land outright. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, Xiaoning returned to her role, inviting Xiaoyang to sit down and go over the available properties. Manager Zhu, still seething with contempt, watched skeptically, convinced that Xiaoyang was all talk and wouldn't be able to pay. Xiaoning provided Xiaoyang with a detailed list of properties, but he already knew exactly what he wanted. He specified his requirements: the land had to be near mountains and water, preferably with a flowing river, and it would be ideal if there were existing factories or large buildings on the site. Xiaoning hesitated, mentioning that such a piece of land did exist, but it was in the Eastern District, an area with many unfinished factories and properties that were difficult to sell. Manager Zhu, however, saw this as a perfect opportunity to further humiliate Xiaoyang, convinced that he wasn't a serious buyer but a troublemaker with unrealistic demands. Xiaoyang, however, was unfazed by the location. In fact, the unfinished factories were a bonus. He reviewed the details and quickly realized that the property in the Eastern District, surrounded by barbed wire and partially developed, was exactly what he needed. He had found his fortress. Realizing that the land with unfinished factories would be highly defensible and save him significant time and money on construction, Zhang Xiaoyang made a firm decision to purchase it. He was ready to sign the contract immediately and pay for the land. Xiaoning, the real estate consultant, was stunned by his resolve. She couldn't fathom why anyone in their right mind would buy such a property. But Xiaoyang was unwavering, even urging her to hurry with the paperwork, teasingly reminding her that someone in the office couldn't wait to fulfill a particularly unpleasant promise. Soon enough, Manager Zhu found himself holding a check for 300,000 yuan, the full payment for the land. He could hardly believe that this seemingly ragged young man had managed to come up with such a sum. To him, the entire situation was absurd. But Xiaoyang, with a sly grin, reminded Zhu that he had upheld his end of the bargain, and now it was Zhu's turn to perform. As he left, Xiaoyang casually mentioned that he'd be sending a donation via super chat so that Zhu wouldn't feel too humiliated. Meanwhile, the other customers in the agency were egging the manager on, eagerly setting up a livestream for the event. One even joked that while his stomach wasn't feeling well, he promised the meal would be fresh. With the first step of his system task complete, Xiaoyang turned his attention to the next challenge, acquiring the funds needed to stockpile supplies and begin building his base. He had spent nearly all his money on the land and now needed to devise a plan to accumulate more resources. As Xiaoyang left the real estate agency, he ran into an old acquaintance, Li Shixiang, who was immediately curious about what Xiaoyang was doing there. However, Li Shixiang's questions were quickly forgotten when he glanced inside and saw the chaos unfolding.
The staff and customers were still pushing manager Zhu to honor his ridiculous bet, with Zhu desperately pleading for help, insisting that he didn't want to eat poop. Meanwhile, Quij Jing was at home, leisurely painting her nails and enjoying a carefree day. Her tranquility was shattered when she received a call from Li Shixiang, who casually mentioned that Xiao Yang had just bought a piece of land for 300,000 yuan at the real estate agency.
Quij Jing was taken aback. Where had he gotten so much money?
Li Shixiang suggested that Xiao Yang had likely used the money he had saved for her bride price.
This realization filled her with rage. How dare Xiao Yang spend what she considered her money?
Li Shixiang advised her to calm down and confront Xiao Yang calmly, but she was too blinded by fury to listen.
She was determined to confront him immediately and expose his betrayal.
Back at Xiao Yang's place, he was deep in thought, planning how to secure the money and resources needed for his survival preparations. His musings were interrupted by a loud, frantic knocking at the door. It was Quij Jing, accompanied by her sister, and she was livid. Without preamble, she accused Xiao Yang of spending her money, specifically the bride price money, to buy land. She claimed that since he had used her money, the land now belonged to her.
Xiao Yang was bewildered by her audacity and struggled to comprehend her irrational claims.
Finally, he decided it was time to set her straight in a way even she couldn't misunderstand. He calmly explained that he had plenty of money, but none of it was going to be spent on her. Moreover, he revealed that he knew all about her affair with Li Shixiang, leaving Quij Jing stunned and confused. She had no idea how Xiao Yang had discovered her secret, as she and Li Shixiang had always been careful, even when renting rooms. Her sister, sensing the tension, attempted to defuse the situation by suggesting that everyone calm down and resolve what she saw as a simple misunderstanding between a couple. But Xiao Yang had no interest in wasting his time on these two women. There was no misunderstanding. Quij Jing was no longer his girlfriend. She was nothing more than a pitiful gold digger clinging to that old, wealthy man, Li Shixiang. With that, Xiao Yang slammed the door in their faces, telling them to get lost, as even looking at them was annoying him. Quij Jing stood outside, still trying to process how Xiao Yang had uncovered her secret. Her sister, who had been unaware of the affair, was equally confused and hurt that Quij Jing hadn't confided in her. She was left wondering if her sister really was involved with a middle-aged man, and why she had kept it hidden. Quij Jing assured her sister that their affair with Li Shixiang wasn't anything serious. They had only rented rooms a few times under uncontrollable circumstances, she said, and with no other options, they now had to regroup and devise a new plan. Quij Jing admitted that she had messed up with Zhang Xiaoyang, but Wei Shura was now determined to take matters into her own hands. As good sisters, she thought, it was only fair that she try to charm Xiao Yang herself. The next day, Xiao Yang arrived at his newly acquired land, accompanied by a construction crew. He had ambitious plans to convert one of the unfinished factories into a fortress, and he was eager to know how long the project would take. After a detailed inspection, Foreman Lee explained that the work would be extensive, reinforcing the walls, building protective towers, installing Texas barbed wire, thickening the steel doors, and adding bulletproof glass. Foreman Lee, curious about Xiao Yang's motivations, asked what kind of threat had driven him to such extremes.
Xiao Yang, not wanting to divulge too much, warned the foreman that asking too many questions could lead to trouble. He was only interested in how much it would cost to complete the construction within a month. The foreman was taken aback by the tight deadline and initially insisted that it couldn't be done. However, Xiao Yang pressed on, hinting that he knew others who might be willing to take on the job if this crew couldn't. Faced with the ultimatum, Foreman Lee reconsidered and calculated that the workers would need to work around the clock, driving the cost up to 20 million yuan, with a 5 million yuan deposit required to start. This proposal wasn't ideal for Xiao Yang, who wanted the work to begin immediately with the promise that he would transfer the money within a week. He assured the construction company that they had nothing to worry about. If he couldn't pay, they could take ownership of the land. As the negotiations were wrapping up, Wei Shura appeared on the construction site. She brazenly clung to Xiao Yang's arm, feigning interest in what he was doing there. Xiao Yang, however, was repulsed by her presence. In his previous life, Wei Shura, along with Quij Jing, had connived to strip him of his parents' inheritance. This time, he was determined to make her pay for her past wrongs,
no matter how hard she tried to charm him. Despite her attempts to act sweet, Xiaoyang saw through her facade and dismissed her advances with cold indifference. Wei Shura tried to engage him, commenting on the beautiful view from the land and guessing that he planned to build a villa. But Xiaoyang made it clear that whatever he built there was none of her business. Wei Shura was puzzled by his behavior. In the past, just a touch from her would make him blush and his heart race, but now, none of her usual tactics seemed to work. Instead, Xiaoyang turned away from her, focusing on instructing the construction workers to widen the gate, clearly uninterested in her presence. Wei Shura, realizing that Qi Jing had ruined everything with her deceit, saw this as an opportunity to move in on Xiaoyang herself, hoping that the land would eventually become hers. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang returned home, deep in thought about how to secure more money. After mortgaging his house, he only managed to secure a 3 million yuan loan, which was far from enough to cover even the first phase of construction. As he contemplated his options, considering the inevitability of the apocalypse and whether selling the house to multiple buyers might not matter in the grand scheme of things, there was a knock on the door. It was his obnoxious neighbor, Grandpa Li, an old man who owned the apartments on the first and second floors and had been trying to buy Xiaoyang's third-floor unit for years. When Xiaoyang refused to sell, Grandpa Li resorted to petty harassment, painting doors, scattering trash, even bringing a coffin and jamming the locks on Xiaoyang's door. Now, the old man was back, falsely accusing Xiaoyang of making noise last night by throwing a party. Xiaoyang, well aware of Grandpa Li's scheming nature, knew this was just another one of his deliberate lies. Zhang Xiaoyang knew the truth. He hadn't hosted any noisy party the previous night, having gone to bed early. However, arguing with Grandpa Li, his scheming neighbor, would be a waste of time. The old man was clearly angling to get his hands on Xiaoyang's house, so Xiaoyang decided to use this to his advantage. Feigning frustration and weariness, Xiaoyang told Grandpa Li that he was ready to sell the house. The old man was stunned, hardly able to believe his ears. But there was a condition: Xiaoyang would stay in the house for another 6 months while he searched for a new place to live. In exchange, Grandpa Li had to transfer 5 million yuan into Xiaoyang's account immediately so he could secure the deposit for his next home. If the old man didn't agree to these terms, the deal was off the table. Unable to resist the prospect of finally acquiring the house, Grandpa Li quickly agreed, but he insisted that they sign a contract to ensure Xiaoyang couldn't change his mind later. This was exactly what Xiaoyang had expected. He knew that when the apocalypse began, the old man would be trapped in that house, likely meeting a grim fate. After the funds were transferred, Xiaoyang had amassed 8 million yuan, including the loan he had taken from the bank. With this money, he could now focus on completing the second task in the system and securing his reward. Xiaoyang decided to visit the largest supermarket in town, where he began diligently stocking up on supplies for the coming year. He piled his carts high with everything he could think of: food, water, medical supplies, and other essentials. Onlookers gawked at him, treating him like a lunatic. They couldn't understand why someone would buy so much at once, and they laughed, dismissing him as another fool taken in by doomsday rumors. But their mockery meant nothing to Xiaoyang. The most important thing was that he had completed the system's task and earned 10 points. Excited, Xiaoyang immediately checked the system store and found a supply box priced at exactly 10 points. Without hesitation, he made the purchase. The box materialized before him, and when he opened it, he discovered an incredible prize: a level 1 space ring. This ring granted him access to a subspace of 500 cubic meters, where time stood still, preserving the freshness of any items stored inside. Xiaoyang was thrilled by this stroke of luck. The space ring was an invaluable asset, allowing him to store fresh food and other perishables indefinitely. Along with the ring, the system issued a new mission: 10 years of sustenance. Completing this mission would earn him 20 points, further enhancing his preparations for the apocalypse. However, before he could dive into his next task, Xiaoyang was approached by the supermarket's security chief, Yang Tao. Word had spread that a crazy guy was causing trouble, and it turned out that Yang Tao recognized Xiaoyang. Yang Tao had been a notorious bully in high school, extorting money from weaker students on behalf of his boss. Xiaoyang had clashed with him many times back then, and now, years later, he wasn't thrilled to see him again. Yang Tao, still as arrogant as ever, demanded that Xiaoyang return all the items to their shelves, threatening consequences if he refused. Xiaoyang, unimpressed,
pointed out that Yang Tao hadn't changed a bit, still resorting to bullying tactics. But Xiaoyang wasn't about to back down. He reminded Yang Tao that as a customer, he was always right, and questioned whether this was how the supermarket treated its patrons. Frustrated, Yang Tao ordered Xiaoyang to pay for the items immediately, warning that he would regret it otherwise. Xiaoyang, undeterred, waited patiently while the cashiers calculated the total cost of his massive haul, which came to 56,000 yuan. When the time came, Xiaoyang confidently swiped his credit card, successfully completing the transaction. Yang Tao, taken aback and clearly defeated, turned to leave, but Xiaoyang wasn't finished with him. He called the security chief back, demanding a public apology for his rude behavior. Xiaoyang made it clear that if he didn't receive an apology, he would return all the goods, forcing the store to restock them, a task that would be both time-consuming and costly. Yang Tao hesitated, thinking Xiaoyang was simply stirring up trouble, but the situation had unfolded in front of a crowd. The onlookers, having witnessed the entire exchange, sided with Xiaoyang, urging Yang Tao to apologize. The entire scene was recorded on video by bystanders who then threatened to make Yang Tao famous on the internet if he didn't issue a sincere apology. Zhang Xiaoyang, seizing the moment, promised that if Yang Tao's apology was heartfelt enough, he would return and buy goods worth 10 times what he had just purchased. To prove his seriousness, Xiaoyang even offered to show Yang Tao his account balance. When the security chief saw that Xiaoyang had 7 million yuan in his account, he was stunned. Reluctantly, he apologized, unable to maintain his pride under the mounting pressure. As Yang Tao passed by Xiaoyang, he advised him not to be so reckless in the future, reminding him that situations can change unexpectedly. Trying to recover some semblance of control, Yang Tao then put on a mask of benevolence, inquiring why Xiaoyang was purchasing so many items. Xiaoyang, maintaining his composure, replied curtly that it was none of Yang Tao's business and hinted that he was planning a significant deal. Sensing an opportunity, Yang Tao suggested that Xiaoyang's ambitions might exceed the supermarket's stock and mentioned that he knew a wholesaler who could meet such large demands. The wholesaler in question was Zhang Shang, who happened to be in the wholesale business now. Yang Tao, eager to facilitate the deal, called Zhang Shang immediately, excitedly informing him that he had found a big customer. Xiaoyang, observing Yang Tao's enthusiasm, realized that some people never change. It was clear that these two were still up to their old tricks, likely skimming profits from the supermarket. Before long, they arrived at Zhang Shang's wholesale warehouse. An expensive car pulled up, driven carelessly, signaling the arrival of Zhang Shang himself. His arrogant demeanor and reckless driving made it clear to Xiaoyang that Zhang Shang had likely never been challenged or faced consequences for his actions, a situation that was about to change. As the two old classmates met, Zhang Shang didn't recognize Xiaoyang at first, prompting Yang Tao to remind him that they had gone to middle and high school together. Even then, it took Zhang Shang a moment to remember, but when he did, he recalled Xiaoyang as that guy with a bit of backbone. Looking Xiaoyang up and down, Zhang Shang immediately judged him based on his non-designer clothes, concluding that Xiaoyang was pretending to be wealthy. Annoyed, Zhang Shang turned on Yang Tao, berating him for wasting his time by bringing a useless client and even kicked him for good measure. Yang Tao, though aware of Xiaoyang's wealth, found himself powerless to convince Zhang Shang, who prided himself on his ability to spot wealth. Undeterred, Xiaoyang remarked that some people never change, calling Zhang Shang an illiterate who looks down on people. Incensed, Zhang Shang grabbed Xiaoyang, demanding he repeat the insult. Xiaoyang, unfazed, reiterated his statement, but it wasn't the insult about looking down on others that set Zhang Shang off, it was being called illiterate. This reaction surprised Xiaoyang, who realized that Zhang Shang was truly shameless. Yang Tao, sensing a fight brewing, quickly intervened, advising Xiaoyang not to touch on Zhang Shang's sore spot, confirming that Zhang Shang was indeed illiterate and hated being reminded of it. For his troubles, Yang Tao received another kick and more insults from Zhang Shang, who was frustrated at not being able to vent his anger as he wished. Turning back to Xiaoyang, Zhang Shang issued an ultimatum: either Xiaoyang bought a truckload of goods from him, or he would have to crawl out on all fours. Xiaoyang, more than satisfied with the offer, told Zhang Shang to release his collar and provide the account number. In a surprising turn of events, Xiaoyang quickly transferred 1 million yuan into Zhang Shang's account, shocking the arrogant boss. Xiaoyang clarified that this was just a deposit, he planned to buy goods worth 5 million yuan in total.
Zhang Shang, though surprised, quickly masked his emotions with a smile, asking what kind of goods Xiaoyang needed. Xiaoyang replied that he required items like oil, rice, salt, snacks, and drinks, essentially, products with a long shelf life. An almost imperceptible smile crossed Shang Ji's face as he received a shipment of near-expired food, an ideal chance to offload it onto Xiaoyong. Upon reaching the warehouse with the supplies, Shang offered Xiaoyong the entire batch at a 10% discount off the original wholesale price. It seemed like a great deal, but Xiaoyong, suspicious that Shang wouldn't sell it so cheaply without a catch, decided to inspect the quality first. As expected, it was a trap. Although the packaging appeared new, the food was on the verge of expiring. Shang hadn't anticipated Xiaoyong would catch on so quickly, so he upped the discount to 50%, but Xiaoyong wasn't interested. With 5 million in hand, he intended to purchase only the highest quality food, though he also had a plan for this nearly expired stock. Xiaoyong offered to buy the expired goods for half the price, on the condition that payment would be deferred by a month. Shang was shocked by Xiaoyong's proposal, but Xiaoyong reassured him by offering his house as collateral. Shang couldn't understand why Xiaoyong needed the expired food and couldn't even begin to suspect that, in the near future, even such food would become highly valuable. Xiaoyong didn't explain further and instructed Shang to deliver the goods to the specified address. Just then, Xiaoyong received a call about the sale of his house. Quickly ending his conversation with Shang, he left to meet the buyer, an elderly man who was ready to make a down payment of 400,000 and give Xiaoyong 3 months to vacate. Everything seemed to be going so smoothly that Xiaoyong grew cautious. He asked the old man why he was in such a rush. The man explained that his granddaughter was changing schools and needed a nearby place to live, and Xiaoyong's house was the only one for sale in the neighborhood. The old man was so straightforward that he unwittingly gave Xiaoyong enough information to raise the price. Realizing his mistake, the man panicked and begged Xiaoyong not to increase the cost, as it represented all his savings. Xiaoyong, not one to take advantage of someone's vulnerability, reassured him that the deal was still on. After signing the contract, the old man was overjoyed. He even apologized to Xiaoyong for interrupting his work, showing such kindness that Xiaoyong doubted the pair could survive the apocalypse. Calling out to the old man before he left, Xiaoyong asked for his address. Shortly after, Xiaoyong arrived at his construction site, where work was progressing well. The foreman reported that 80% of the project was complete, with walls and doors as strong as Xiaoyong had specified. The warehouse, built on a factory's foundation, was ready for use. Overjoyed by the news, Xiaoyong immediately called Shang to deliver the supplies. By evening, the warehouse, more like a doomsday vault, was stocked with resources under Xiaoyong's careful supervision. As the workers departed, Xiaoyong could finally assess the completed work. Everything had gone according to plan, and he could breathe a sigh of relief. At that moment, the system notified him that he had successfully completed a task, earning 20 system points. Opening the system store, Xiaoyong found a new item, a box containing awakened abilities. Without hesitation, he purchased it, gaining a level 1 ability called Mind's Eye, which allowed him to detect the hostility of others. Xiaoyong was thrilled, believing this skill to be invaluable in the early stages of the apocalypse. The system, however, wasn't giving him much time to rest, assigning him another mission, to acquire a large cache of weapons. Xiaoyong didn't mind, as this aligned with his next objective, arming himself for the approaching apocalypse. He soon found himself in the seedy underbelly of the city, walking through the bustling, late-night black market. The air buzzed with the constant chatter of customers and sellers haggling over prices, scams lurking around every corner. As he scanned his surroundings, something caught his eye, a familiar figure, Li Shushi, the man Chu Jing had clung to during the first apocalypse. Xiaoyong watched as Li haggled aggressively over some fake jewelry, eventually wearing down the seller to a deal. Though Xiaoyong hadn't expected to run into him, it made sense that Li would be trolling the market for cheap jade trinkets. Chu Jing had always been foolish enough to fall for such fake gifts. A few feet away, Xiaoyong finally spotted what he was after, a stall displaying sharp blades, each one deadlier than the next. A smile crept across his face. He had found what he was looking for. Squatting down in front of the vendor, who looked like a military man in camouflage, Xiaoyong asked if they had any hard stuff for sale. The vendor wasn't amused by Xiaoyong's cryptic request, tossing him a knife sharpener and telling him to grind the blades himself if he wanted something harder. Growing more serious, Xiaoyong clarified that none of these knives would cut it, he needed something far tougher. Understanding the implication, the vendor turned serious, asking if Xiaoyong was trying to start trouble. But their tense exchange was interrupted by the beep of the vendor's phone. 200,000 yuan had just been transferred to his account. Xiaoyong held up the payment receipt, a confident look on his face. After transferring the enormous funds via the QR code at the stall, Xiaoyong successfully pacified the irate seller and proved that he was a serious buyer. Finally convinced, Mr. Camel called one of his men to watch the stall while he handled more pressing business. His attitude toward Xiaoyong did a complete 180 degrees turn as he politely guided him to a nearby building, since talking out in the open wasn't ideal. They entered the unassuming building next to the store without any issue. Once inside, Mr. Camo tried to sell Xiaoyong some homemade guns, designed for small targets, at 2,000 yuan each, with cheap ammo. Xiaoyong immediately turned him down, which seemed to ignite Mr. Camo's competitive spirit. He then brought out some replica revolvers modeled after actual service handguns, priced at 5,000 yuan each, with bullets costing 5 yuan apiece. This offer was barely acceptable to Xiaoyong, but he still prepaid 200,000 yuan. Confused, Mr. Camo asked about the prepayment. Xiaoyong clarified that the earlier transfer was just a 10% prepayment for a much larger order, 2 million yuan worth of weaponry. Now feeling uneasy about this mysterious buyer, Mr. Camo grew more cautious. Xiaoyong quickly spun a story, explaining that his subordinates usually handled such back-alley transactions, but since he was handling it personally now, he didn't appreciate being asked about his identity. Understanding that Xiaoyong meant serious business, Mr. Camo respectfully asked him to wait for a moment, then hurried off to another room. He locked the door behind him and quickly scanned the area through the window to ensure they weren't being watched. Returning to Xiaoyong, he whispered that everything could be arranged, and all he needed was an address for the delivery. They would complete the transaction at midnight 2 days later, and payment would be accepted only in cash. By the time Xiaoyong left the building, Mr. Camo was treating him like a VIP. However, as soon as he returned to the night market, he ran into the same familiar figure from earlier, Li Shushi, the obnoxious man from before. Li, spotting Xiaoyong, couldn't resist making a snide comment about their unexpected encounter at the black market. He speculated that Xiaoyong's recent splurge must have something to do with Chu Jing, suggesting Xiaoyong was trying to sell everything off and live comfortably. Unbothered by the idiot's ramblings, Xiaoyong decided to try out his newly acquired ability. Activating his mind's eye, an imperceptible glow appeared in his vision. He immediately noticed a happy aura above Mr. Camo and an angry one over Li Shushi. Just as he expected, the ability was extremely useful. To test it further, he taunted Li by mocking him for buying fake, second-hand goods to impress Chu Jing. After all, he quipped, Chu Jing herself was second-hand trash, so it made sense she'd fall for such cheap tricks. This struck a nerve, making Li's anger spike. He exploded in a tirade of curses aimed at Xiaoyong. Sensing the tension, Mr. Camo intervened and asked if the fat bastard was bothering his new VIP client. Xiaoyong calmly labeled Li as an enemy, and Mr. Camo took the hint. He assured Xiaoyong that he and his men would handle the situation and teach Li a lesson. Xiaoyong agreed but reminded them not to go overboard, he still had plans for Li in the future. As Mr. Camo's well-built thugs approached Li, the wannabe gangster's confidence crumbled. He stammered, his arrogance vanishing as the menacing group closed in. Mr. Camo didn't waste any more words, pulling out a baton as his crew made quick work of Li. They left him beaten and bruised in the middle of the dark street, shoe prints covering his face and his once white suit dirted from the kicks. This incident only deepened Li Shushi's hatred for Xiaoyong. 2 days later, the rendezvous at the warehouse went as planned. Both Xiaoyong and Mr. Camo arrived on time. In front of Xiaoyong stood a truckload of suspicious-looking crates, exactly what he had been waiting for. The delivery of firearms signaled the successful completion of his task, earning him another 10 system points, bringing his total to 20. The crates were packed with heavy firearms, rifles, pistols, and every piece of extra equipment Xiaoyong would need. To his surprise, the system also rewarded him with a bonus, a +2 physical enhancement potion. Holding the syringe in his hand, Xiaoyong was pleased with the unexpected bonus. The +2 rating indicated that the potion's effect was twice as powerful as the one available in the system store. Without wasting time, he injected the syringe into his vein. The sensation was far from pleasant. The potion coursed through his bloodstream with an intense, agonizing pain. As an average adult male, Xiaoyang's physical score was around 5 points, and with the +2 enhancement, his overall strength would increase by nearly 40%. This boost was significant, prompting Xiaoyang to immediately reopen the system store. His gaze fixed on the other physical enhancement potion listed there, recognizing the immense value of increased strength as he held yet another syringe in his hand. Since he had already unlocked a physical boost, Xiaoyang decided to maximize the advantage by injecting another strength-enhancing potion. With his physical score now at 8, he was 60% stronger than the average man and eager to test his newfound power. Noticing some loose iron bars scattered around the warehouse, Xiaoyang grabbed one of the thick ones typically used for building reinforcement. He tossed it into the air and then kicked it with all his might. His powerful strike bent the thick bar significantly, and the momentum sent it crashing into a nearby wall, leaving a decent dent. With this level of strength, his bare hands were practically weapons. He felt confident he could handle the early stages of the apocalypse with ease. As for the weapons he had just acquired, leaving them out in the open would be reckless. Xiaoyang decided to store them in his spatial ring for safekeeping. He simply pointed his ring toward the truck's contents, and they were promptly absorbed. If his memory served him right, the apocalypse would begin the day after tomorrow. Time was running out to finish his preparations. For some reason, the image of the old man who had bought his house kept crossing Xiaoyang's mind. The man had pleaded with him, using hard-earned cash to secure a home for his granddaughter. Xiaoyang had experienced countless life-and-death situations and betrayals during the first apocalypse, but he wasn't one to ignore the plight of the innocent. He decided that he would at least send some essential supplies to the old man. It was the least he could do to repay him for providing the funds that helped Xiaoyang prepare for the coming disaster. The next day, Xiaoyang drove to a rundown apartment building in a shady part of a nearby city. Without GPS, finding the place would have been nearly impossible, given how hidden and decrepit it was. The old man had clearly been living in poverty, as the building was old, lacked an elevator, and his unit was on the top floor. Reaching the door, Xiaoyang knocked casually. Realizing that he needed to explain the supplies he was bringing, he activated his storage ring and materialized box after box of essentials, stacking them in the hallway. Just then, the old man opened the door, thinking it was his landlord, and began apologizing for not having the rent. When he saw it was Xiaoyang, and noticed the mountain of boxes crowding the hallway, his confusion only grew. Xiaoyang promised to explain everything later but insisted they first move the boxes inside before any nosy neighbors spotted them. Within minutes, and with Xiaoyang doing most of the heavy lifting, they managed to bring everything into the apartment. The old man was amazed at how effortlessly Xiaoyang moved the supplies, without even breaking a sweat. As Xiaoyang surveyed the room, he analyzed whether it could serve as a temporary shelter. The front door seemed sturdy enough. He then turned to the old man and told him to listen carefully. Xiaoyang explained that the supplies were to be used sparingly, as they would need to last for at least 6 months, starting tomorrow. Just as he was about to delve deeper into what was coming, something caught Xiaoyang's eye: a photograph displayed in the room. In the photo was the old man and his granddaughter, and to Xiaoyang's shock, the girl in the picture was none other than Shan, a close friend from the first apocalypse. He immediately asked the old man if her name was M. Shan, which puzzled the man even more, as he had never mentioned her name to Xiaoyang. Dark memories flooded Xiaoyang's mind as he recalled Shan's tragic fate in the previous timeline. She had expressed deep regret over her grandfather's death, who had risked everything to save her. In that doomed timeline, the old man had bravely broken into her zombie-infested school, managing to rescue her but dying in the process. Having been close to her in his past life, Xiaoyang vowed that he wouldn't let that happen again. His expression hardening, Xiaoyang turned to the old man and declared that the house was no longer for sale. The elderly man, panicked, thought Xiaoyang was pulling out of their agreement. But Xiaoyang quickly dropped a much bigger bombshell: the world would turn into a living hell tomorrow. The house in Shan's school wouldn't matter anymore. Their priority now was to pick her up and bring her to a safer location.
The old man, overwhelmed by the sudden declaration, couldn't process what Xiaoyong was saying. In his urgency, Xiaoyong realized he had failed to properly explain the apocalypse. Realizing that words alone wouldn't suffice, Xiaoyong decided to take a show, don't tell approach. He activated his storage ring, and in an instant, all the boxes of supplies vanished. To further demonstrate his point, he absorbed everything else in the room as well. The old man stood in stunned silence, staring at the now empty apartment. There was only one way to describe what he had just witnessed: magic. Xiaoyong then revealed that he had superpowers and could see into the future. If the old man wanted to survive, and more importantly, save Shan Shan, he needed to trust Xiaoyong completely. Their next move was to get Shan Shan out of her school before it was too late. During the car ride to Shan Shan's school, the old man sat in stunned silence, his mouth agape as he stared at Xiaoyong in disbelief. Meanwhile, Xiaoyong drove like a man possessed, disregarding traffic laws in his rush to get there as quickly as possible. The urgency in his driving matched the growing sense of dread. They needed to find Shan Shan immediately. When they arrived, they ran out of the vehicle and began searching for her. Soon, they spotted a young woman in front of one of the department buildings, surrounded by a few other students. It was none other than Shan Shan. At that moment, a stereotypical mean girl was slapping Shan Shan across the face, all because a boy liked her. Despite the abuse, Shan Shan, with defiant eyes, declared that she had no interest in the creep. The bullying didn't stop there. Another girl kicked Shan Shan in the stomach for daring to talk back. The two witches took turns beating her, their jealousy fueled by Shan Shan's beauty and the attention she received. The tense scene escalated quickly until it was interrupted by the voice of Shan Shan's grandfather. Seeing his beloved granddaughter being tormented, the old man rushed toward her, shouting at the girls to stop. The bullies, however, turned their attention to him, while some thuggish boys blocked his path, brandishing blunt weapons and knives. They told the old man to step back and let the girls settle their business. But despite the threat, the old man didn't back down. He charged forward, yelling at the boys for being shameless bullies. One of the thugs raised a steel bat, aiming for the old man's head. The situation was about to take a violent turn when Xiaoyong intervened just in time, catching the bat mid-swing. The thug struggled to pull the bat free, but it was no use. Xiaoyong's enhanced strength made the task effortless. Then, with a swift kick to the thug's solar plexus, Xiaoyong sent him flying through the air like a ragdoll. The thug crashed hard, as if launched by a cannon. Seeing their comrade's fate, the remaining two thugs hesitated, momentarily considering whether they could take on Xiaoyong. The cold, calculating look in his eyes told them otherwise, but still, they attempted to team up. One thug, armed with a bat, moved in from the flank, while the other, holding a knife, advanced from the front. Their strategy didn't last long. Xiaoyong easily dodged the bat with a swift duck, his enhanced reflexes from the potions proving incredibly useful. Grabbing the thug by the collar, Xiaoyong slammed him into the ground with such force that the boy instantly passed out, his head likely hitting the concrete. The last thug, now desperate, charged in with the knife. But Xiaoyong barely even blinked. He redirected the weapon with ease and fixed his cold, unblinking gaze on the blonde thug. Without breaking eye contact, Xiaoyong readied his leg for another powerful kick. This time, he struck the thug on the side of his leg, sending him crumpling to the ground like a folded omelet. The thug's face smashed into the pavement with a painful thud. In a matter of seconds, all three wannabe gangsters were incapacitated. With the thugs out of the way, the only remaining obstacles were the two witches who had been tormenting Shan Shan. Having gone through the first apocalypse, Xiaoyong was a firm believer in equal rights, equal fights. He didn't hesitate to smack the lead bully across the face. The force of the slap caught her completely off guard. She shivered as her cheek turned bright red from the impact. The second bully, who had been pulling Shan Shan's hair, got a taste of her own medicine. Xiaoyong grabbed her by the hair and didn't let go, no matter how much she pleaded. His murderous glare made it clear he wasn't playing around. Then, to add to her terror, Xiaoyong pulled out the knife he had taken from the blonde thug earlier and placed it against her neck. The witch was immediately frightened to tears, convinced that her life was over. The bystanders watched in horror as a sharp slash and an ear-piercing scream filled the air. But Xiaoyong hadn't killed her, not yet, anyway. Instead, he had given her an extreme haircut,
slicing off a significant chunk of her long hair and humiliating her in front of everyone. The bully witch dropped to her knees, sobbing, while her friend stood frozen in shock. Still not learning her lesson, she screamed that she wouldn't let Xiao Yong get away with this. But Xiao Yong didn't bother acknowledging her empty threats. Instead, he grabbed the locks of hair he had cut and sprinkled them on top of her head, further adding to her disgrace. He coldly told her that he had done her a favor, explaining that long hair would only be a burden in the near future. His cryptic words left everyone confused, but Xiao Yong assured them that having short hair might just save her life in the days to come.